So, welcome to Right Tree, Right Place. My name is Olivia Price, and I manage the adult education programming at the University of Washington Botanic Gardens. And we're one of your hosts for this morning's workshop. Today's presentation will be delivered by Bria Blitch, who is the Trees for Neighborhoods program manager. And Bria and her team work hard every year to plant trees in Seattle and make sure that our urban forest is healthy and growing. And Trees for Neighborhoods is a program within Trees for Seattle, which is the umbrella effort for all of the city's urban forestry work. So I'll just go over a few logistics of how we'll be using the Zoom platform this morning. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A icon. And if you click on that icon, a dialog box will open where you can submit questions at any time during Bria's presentation, and we'll plan to come back on screen and answer those at the end of her presentation. Also, if you're having any technical difficulties or need some assistance, you're welcome to send questions for me there at any time. I've also enabled closed captioning or live transcription, and you can either choose to show or hide those subtitles by clicking on the CC option at the bottom of your screen. So today's class is being recorded, and I will send out a link to the recording on Monday. And please feel free to share that email with any friends, family members, neighbors who you think might be interested in participating in the Trees for Neighborhoods program. And with that, Bria, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Olivia. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is our second and last Right Tree, Right Place webinar. My name is Bria Blitch, and I'm the new Tree Programs Manager, or Trees for Neighborhoods Program Manager. Um, and we've got a lot to talk about today, so we're just going to get started. But thank you so much for being here, and you'll get a PDF of my PowerPoint as well with Olivia's email to click on any links and refer back to this later. But in general today, I'm going to be going over a lot of content for the first about 45 minutes to save room for about 15 to 20 minutes for questions at the end. And we're just going to jump right in effort for time. But as Olivia said, this is Trees for Seattle, and this is an umbrella for all tree and urban forest resources that we provide for Seattle residents. We do this in a lot of ways, but we really want to increase participation in planting and caring for trees on public and private property. We do this a variety of different ways, such as volunteer events, where we organize volunteers to help care for trees in public spaces. We organize tree walks, and we encourage people to go on and help create tree walks in their neighborhoods within the city. And of course, we run this program, which you'll learn a lot about at the end, but we're here to plant about 1,000 trees a year in the city of Seattle. And in general, we're here to help with any of your tree planting, tree care, or just general tree questions throughout the year. So very quickly, what is an urban forest? So an urban forest are all trees that's within an urban area. And this does include your street trees, which are typically trees in the planting strip between the sidewalk and the curb. But this can also include trees in traffic circles and trees in unimproved rights of way. Unimproved rights of way can be public stairways, abandoned or unpaved alleys, and green belts next to your home that are not owned by the Seattle Parks. Park trees, of course, are included yard trees. The yard trees that you have and your neighbors have in your homes make up a large portion of your urban forest, so you're really contributing. And then, of course, trees on private and commercial property, such as shopping centers or campuses. And in general, urban forests are planned, planted, and maintained. These are all things that you'll be doing as well by participating in this program and participating to your greater urban forest. So there are a lot of benefits that an urban forest has. This is but a small list, but two main things I really want to touch on in terms of benefits are benefits to your physical health and benefits to your mental health. So for physical health, trees help clean air, they help filter pollutants and help clean our water and help filter our water as well. They also help reduce stormwater runoff and flooding, which is really important for a healthy sound. And they help cool our temperature. They provide a lot of shade. They can reduce cooling costs for your home. And then for your mental health, trees help create, beautiful, friendly neighborhoods. They add a lot of character and charm. They're very pleasant to look at, of course. They help provide safer, quieter streets. Folks are more likely to be out and about. Traffic tends to be a little bit slower in streets that have more trees. And in general, um, help create healthy, happier people. And I say that because trees do actually really help. They help stimulate your parasympathetic nervous system. That one always gets me, which helps reduce your stress. And by reducing stress, kind of goes right back into your physical health, which creates this really kind of beautiful loop that trees provide. And this is by no means the end, but things that we really love and appreciate about trees in our cities. So in general, fall is going to be the time that we're going to be planting trees. If I can get my little laser over, here we go. So I know that spring feels like a really good time to plant trees, but as you can see from this chart, October to December, we're going to get the most rain, and this is when trees are starting to go dormant for the year. This is a great time to plant because when you receive your tree, we're going to go through it at the planting and care workshops, but you're going to end up cutting off a lot of roots, and you're going to be, working that tree, and it's going to be a little stressful for it, but it's going to be okay. But in doing that, and you plant it in the fall, and it goes through the winter, it has time to really settle and establish in the place that it's going to be long term. When we want to plant in the spring, those trees are pushing out new growth, and they're sending a hormone down to the roots to initiate root growth. Pretty much saying like now's the time, they're settled in and they want to grow, and they want to grow as quickly as they can. If we're planting in the spring and you cut off a lot of roots at the time in which it's trying to trigger that growth, we're going to be kind of stunting that tree a little bit in terms of what it's able to accomplish. And also, it gets very hot pretty quickly, as we've experienced this week. If you try to plant in the spring months, depending on the year, there may or may not be as much water, but the temperatures really start to rise, and trying to establish yourself as a tree during this time after you've cut off all your roots can be a stressful time for trees. So we're going to be planning now to plant in the fall. There's a series of questions that we're going to go over today, and these are all things that I want you to ask yourself when you're considering applying to the program and considering getting a tree. We're going to go through each of these, so I won't quite read them out here. But the first question is, I want you to ask yourself, why am I planting a tree? These are a lot of benefits, some of which we've touched on in the beginning when we talked about an urban forest. But understanding why you might want a tree can really help drive the tree selection that you ultimately end up choosing. Maybe you want really a lot of shade to help shade out your home. In general, trees help create a sense of place. They create memories, places of gathering. They can also help create a privacy screen. And as a reminder, you can apply to up to 3 free trees each year for the Trees for Neighborhoods program. So if you're wanting to build a privacy screen, you could apply for 3 of them and establish a really nice privacy screen all in 1 year. And on our trees this year, the incense cedar is a great example of a tree that does really well for screening. Maybe you want to plant trees for wildlife to help stabilize your slopes. And then as we've mentioned, this may be more of an unconscious decision, but when you plant trees, you really are helping control stormwater runoff and reduce flooding in your area as well. I want you to then think about what's going to influence your tree choice. And this is going to be, first, what is your available space? And I want you to be looking at available space above ground. And that's going to be your canopy and how wide and large that tree is going to get. But I also want you to think below ground for things such as underground utilities, other structures for the roots to grow. Speaking of structures, you're then going to look around and see Is this a planting strip? Is it located near a sidewalk or your driveway? Are there utility poles, other trees? What is around that could affect the decision I'm able to make on either the size of my tree or the limitations that might start, breaking down our list of 14 trees that we're offering this year, and slim it down to something that accommodates what you want in your space. I want you to think about light exposure. And when we think about light exposure, I want you to think about the type of light that you're going to be getting through the growing season. And that's going to be, spring, summer, early fall. If you have a spot that gets several hours of sun, but it's shaded out, but in the winter you get a lot more light, that's okay. We are really most focused on that growing season sunshine. So full sun is going to be 6 hours or more of light. Partial sun and shade is going to be about 3 to 6 hours of direct light, and then shade is 3 or less. And I will say online, you'll see it in the application as well, and I'll show you an example. But if you go online and you're researching what tree do you think you want, we have light exposure, minimum planting strip size. We have a lot of great information for each tree available to you on the website, but you can definitely reach out to me and I'm happy to talk to you about it and see what might be a good fit. And then lastly, I want you to think about your soil drainage. Is your site that you want to plant really compacted? Is it very fluffy, easy to dig into, or something maybe really compact and tough that you're going to have to break up a little bit to help the tree out? So I have a little example here. So let's say, this is your front planting strip, and you've determined that this is your available space. Step one, we're like, all right, this is where we want to plant our tree. We're then going to look at surrounding structures, and you can see that I know that this is a driveway, but I know this might be difficult to see, but this is going to be a driveway. And we have minimum planting distances that we have to achieve when we're thinking about where we can place a tree. This is also listed with every tree and all the information, but I'm happy to answer. But if you have a driveway, you're going to want to plant at least 7.5 feet away from your driveway. And this is so roots over time don't come up and start breaking up your foundations of your sidewalks and your driveway. So now we know, all right, our starting point's about 7.5 feet. There's also a light pole here. And per SDOT regulations, which is the Seattle Department of Transportation, we know we have to plant at least 20 feet away from that street light. And that's to provide safe clearance and ensure that that light doesn't get blocked, or signs, of course, as well. So now we're thinking to ourselves, all right, we need to be 7.5 feet from the driveway, 20 feet from the light pole. So if you're able, depending on the size tree, we're likely going to be able to fit one tree in this planting space. So even though it looks like, wow, this is pretty large, maybe I could fit more, it's really important to be mindful of all of the other factors contributing to your tree. And then also, I'm going to be talking about it next, but these thick black lines at the bottom that are about 20 feet high are communication lines. And I'll show you some examples and we'll dive into it, but those particular lines are not high voltage, but it's really important to identify if you have high voltage lines. Those are about 35 feet high. If you do, you must plant a power line friendly tree. Even if you have space for a large tree, those utilities restrict you to a smaller tree size. But let's dive into that and get the laser out of here. So for utility lines, like I said, you want to be looking and seeing if there are utility lines directly above where you want to be planting a tree. If they are on the other side of the street, there's a lot more wiggle room and you can pick a tree that maybe doesn't spread as wide. But in general, very important, the utility lines, as I said, are at the topmost piece of the pole, and you'll see these like coil-like structures, which are insulators, or on the occasion, you'll see a transformer box attached, and you'll see it linked up to the top of the pole. Those are going to be your high voltage lines, and we have to plant trees that are at least 30 feet high at most or less, so that they don't interact and engage with those lines, because that is a hazard. When we think about our utility lines, it's also really important to put in a ticket with 811 and identify where your underground utility lines are. We need to be staying at least 5 feet away from those. So that could be your water lines, sewer, gas, underground electric, or underground communications. As I said, you'll get a PDF of this PowerPoint. But if you're wondering where your side sewer is to help kind of drive a decision for you, you can click this link and put your address in, and it will show you where your side sewer is. I can also usually see where your water line is in our mapping software. The others you'll need to get a ticket in, but between this link and myself, we can help you at least map out what we think could fit in your space, and let the permit process help determine the rest throughout the season. And then, as I said before, these are our examples of our communication and service lines. So get the laser back in here. As I mentioned, these lines are not high voltage. So those communication lines are going to be the really thick black wires that run at about 20 feet high. Those are communication lines, Xfinity, Comcast, all of those folks. And then a service line or a service drop is the line that goes directly from the power pole to your home. And that is how you get home or you get power to your home. That is also not high voltage. So as you can see here, it's okay for those communication lines to interact with trees because they're not high voltage. And I know it's a little tough to see with the brick wall in the back, but they've actually pruned this tree to allow those wires to pass through. Again, perfectly fine. You'll see in this photo, that wire is being pulled a little bit, which is okay. It's not high voltage, and these lines are made to have a little bit of a give. What's going to end up happening is over time that communication company is probably going to have to come and just adjust the wires, but this is not a high voltage hazard since these are communication lines. Let's get that out of here. All right. I want you to then think about what is the right tree for you. And this has a couple of different options. First of which is going to be the tree shape and the tree form. Now, tree shape is really important, especially when we think long-term, both visually and aesthetically, but also when it comes time to prune your tree. So I've put one example of each shape tree that we're offering this year under this little graphic. But over time, let's say if you get an alley elm, it wants to be a V-shaped tree. If you try to prune it to be round, that tree is always going to respond by wanting to be a V-shaped tree. So you want to pick a tree that works with your space, and just know that it genetically is always going to want to be that shape. And you'll notice I don't have an example for a columnar tree this year. We have trees that are columnar-like, but not a strict columnar shape. But we have several oval-shaped trees, and if you have a tree that's columnar or oval, they can typically be placed a little bit closer, depending on the tree species. Let me know. We're happy to chat about it. But I also want you to think about if you want an evergreen or a deciduous tree, and depending what you're looking for that space. Evergreen trees are putting in a lot of hard work all year round and really helping provide that shade, the stormwater runoff, and a lot of those really great benefits that trees provide all through the winter when our deciduous trees are still putting in a lot of great work, especially in terms of our stormwater, but they don't have leaves, and maybe you want to pick a tree with a good winter appeal for its bark, as it doesn't have leaves half the year. So tree size at maturity, as you would expect, the larger your tree gets, the larger the benefit it gets. And this is really important when you think about the type of space that you have to plant a tree and a plant. So let's say you have space in your yard to accommodate a ponderosa pine this year, but you want to plant a Sarah's favorite crepe myrtle. That's perfectly fine. I do encourage you to plant the tree that you are most excited about, But if you have space for a large tree, I really encourage you to plant the largest tree that you have for your space. I say this for a few reasons. One, to maximize our benefits, but also there are folks out there that have small planting strips or overhead power lines that restrict them to only being able to choose those small trees. They don't have the same type of options that maybe someone else does in their yard and these other spaces. So by choosing a small tree when you have space for something bigger could be wasting a benefit potential or taking that tree away from someone else that can only plant that tree. We have, limited quantities. 1,000 trees sounds like a lot of trees, and it is, but when you break it down per species, these are important things to consider. When we talk about spacing between our trees, we want to make sure that our trees are growing next to each other and not into each other. So for small trees, this is going to be about 15 to 20 feet apart. Medium trees are going to be about 25 to 30 feet apart, and large trees are going to be about 30 feet or more. This does vary depending on the mature width of that tree. And as I said, columnar trees can typically be planted a little closer because they're so tall and narrow. But this is very important. So let's say, for example, this year, you want to plant 2 hackberry trees in your front planting strip. A hackberry tree is going to spread about 30 feet wide. So we can imagine that a balanced, healthy tree at maturity is going to have about 15 feet on one side and 15 feet on the other. So if you want to, you still need to space it 30 feet apart because that is how large one will get, because one will go 15 over and then the one next to it will come 15 over and they're going to meet at that 30-foot mark. So really important to consider your spacing and make sure that there is enough room for the trees that you want to plant. And considering, of course, utilities and all these other spacing factors, but very critical that we're giving our trees enough space to grow and not grow into each other. So just a quick moment for pest resistance. I wanted to mention this in here. As we're selecting trees for the program, we do choose trees and aim to choose trees that have pest and disease resistance for things that may be to avoid trees that might be more susceptible to certain diseases and be sensitive to our region. So very quickly, just some regional concerns that we're on the lookout for, and of course others, but these are the big ones now, is the emerald ash borer. This is a wood-boring insect that kills ash trees and is, if you've heard about it in the East Coast, it's been, yeah, it's a very critical pest, but it's not quite here yet, but we're fully preparing for it, and this is why we're not planting ash trees as part of this program. There's also Dutch elm disease, which this disease, as it suggests, goes after traditional elms such as the American or English elm. Resistant elms have been created through crossbreeding, and we have offered those in the past to ensure that they're not susceptible to Dutch elm disease. There's the bronze birch borer. I'll say that 3 times fast, but if you've seen a lot of dying birch trees in the city of Seattle, this is likely why. But it's a wood-boring insect that is currently wiping out and really focused on European and Himalayan birches here in the city of Seattle. This is why, if you participated in the program last year, we offered the Heritage river birch, which is resistant to bronze birch borer and is a great alternative if you have your own project going on and you really love birch trees, that's a great option to not have a tree is susceptible to bronze birch borer. And there's Verticillium wilt. I wanted to put this in here because maples, and the Japanese maple in particular, are very susceptible to this. It's a soil-borne fungus. And that paired with the very high population of maple trees that we have in the city, this is why we don't offer maples as part of the program, or at least it's been quite some time, many years since we've offered a maple tree. We love and appreciate them, but we're trying to plant trees that are set up for as much success as we are able to set them up for. So very quickly, something that you might be considering, when you plant a tree or looking at a tree and you're thinking about what really appeals to you, and that could be foliage, flower, or bark. So foliage, of course, varies from tree to tree, and it's what we see at least half of the year, if not more. If you choose a conifer, you're going to see that all year round. But a lot of deciduous trees are going to get really beautiful, rich fall color. So if you like that a lot, that's a great choice. And in particular, the Tupelo Tower, Black Tupelo. Also say that one 3 times fast. That one gets me every time. Um, that gets really beautiful shades of red and orange and yellow and is really striking come the fall. Different trees will flower. A lot of our smaller trees have really impressive flowers, such as the American smoke tree. And as a really fun fact, they get that smoky appearance um, and named after it because they're going to get little hairs that form on the flowers after the flowers die. And it does look really fluffy and really quite beautiful. There's also, for example, the Sarah's favorite crepe myrtle. These have really nice, fluffy, white clustered flowers. They're going to flower um, more so in late summer, and that'll be likely the only time they flower that year, but we love and appreciate when they do. It's really beautiful. And then bark may not be the first thing you think about, but bark, for one, is really unique and cool, but it adds a lot of winter appeal if you're picking one of these deciduous trees. So for example, the hackberry is really unique. It has very smooth bark, but it has these like wart-like bark pieces on it that give it a lot of texture and a lot of flair, so to speak. And then our ponderosa pine, as it matures, it's going to have these really large plates with hues of red and orange and brown with these deep black fissures in between, and is a really beautiful contrast. So I encourage you to really dive in and look at your trees, look at pictures, get excited. They're all really fun. And then reach out if you had any particular questions about these. I want to take a moment to talk about native versus non-native trees. And I like to think of them less as native versus non-native and more about native and non-native. We get some questions about why maybe we're not planting more native trees. And we love and appreciate our native trees, but I do want to emphasize that an urban environment is not a native environment. Not to say that our native trees won't do well, but an urban environment can have a lot of harsh pressures that a native one may not or does not have, such as pollution, utilities, soil compaction, limited water availability. We put a lot of pressure on these trees and they can really handle it, but it is something to consider. And when we add non-native species in the mix, there are trees out there that can really handle these tough urban environments. And also by including these trees, we're able to offer a larger diversity of trees, which helps create a more resilient urban forest for Seattle so that, if, gosh, one of those insect or disease or a different one on that list, a new one, were to come in and we started recognizing it in the city, we wouldn't be at risk at losing a significant portion of our canopy if that disease or insect really started to ravage what we've had. And it helps provide more small trees that we're able to offer. Conifers make excellent yard trees. Please don't be afraid of them, but do be mindful that they need a lot of space to grow. And I know I probably don't have to tell you guys that, but I do just want to remind you all when you're considering your planting strips, they need to be at least 12 feet wide or bigger to accommodate those trees because you're going to get it. And like this photo, it's going to be very small, really cute. But over time, we want to plant it and be really intentional because you're going to get a really large, incredible tree in your space. And now is the time to prepare for this future. And then just to say too, we do avoid planting invasive trees such as the English holly, cherry laurel, or the European hawthorn. So we do not add those as part of our program. Just to highlight a few things really quickly, you're going to have the option to plant a yard tree or a street tree. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of key differences in that. And maybe you also want to apply to both, which is perfectly good, very exciting. But if you're planting a yard tree, there is no permit required. The permits are distributed and regulated by SDOT, which is the Seattle Department of Transportation. But this is private property, no permit needed. You do need to submit a ticket to 811 to make sure that you're checking for your underground utilities, and we're staying at least 5 feet away from all of those. You know, to be mindful and intentional about selecting a tree that is right for the space, and to think about how close that tree is going to be to your home, driveways, or other structures that we've discussed as part of the PowerPoint. Now, if you're planting a street tree, you do need a street tree planting permit from SDOT. You must consider the planting strip width, and those are all things that we have listed on our website. But let's say, for example, you want to plant the tupelo. That needs a 6-foot minimum planting strip. So if you want to plant that tree, it's got to be able to fit in there. And then we'll consider, of course, our other utilities and other structures to see if that's still a good fit at the end of our assessment. And as I've said, these are all listed online, and I'm happy to give them to you so you don't have to look too hard to figure out what these minimum planting distances are. The good news is that we do, if you apply for a street tree, I'm going to be submitting the street tree permit for you on your behalf and working closely with both Olivia's team and SDOT to have your locates checked with 811 and have the SDOT arborist go out there and approve your planting space or not. They're going to be able to go out, say yes or no. I will be in close contact with you on what they say. And if you're approved, they're actually going to leave a small sign with a little stake in the exact spot that you're going to plant the tree that you've been approved for. I encourage you to take a photo of this. Things happen, the stake might get removed, your locates might get washed away, and it's important for you to remember where that is, or you're going to have to call 811 again or reach out to us for that planting space. So what is a street tree? I've talked about it a little bit previously, but just to say again, these are trees in the planting strip between the sidewalk and the curb, but they also include trees in traffic circles, unimproved right-of-ways, such as public stairways, abandoned or unpaved alleys, and green belts next to your home that are not owned by the Seattle Parks Department. Now, this is very important. So who is responsible for street trees? If a tree is planted by the city of Seattle, it is owned and maintained by the city. And this is typically SDOT as they regulate these. If you plant a tree privately, which is what's going to happen if you plant a tree through the Trees for Neighborhoods program, that tree is owned and maintained by the adjacent property owner, which would be you. And I just want to say that regardless of ownership, SDOT regulates all trees in the right-of-way. So what that means is if you want to plant another street tree, you'll need a permit. If you want to remove a street tree, you'll need a permit. And if you want to prune a branch larger than 2 inches in diameter or more than 15% of that canopy, you'll need a permit, even if that tree is privately maintained. I will say too, if you have a tree in your planting space that you want to remove and apply for a tree as part of this program as a replacement for that, we do not submit removal permits on your behalf. We will do the street tree permitting process with you as part of the application period and as we go through the next few months. But if you need to remove that tree first, you need to start that free permit now so that SDOT can get out there, approve that for you, and you have time to remove that tree before you receive a tree if you've been granted one in the lottery from October to November. So get that started if that is you and that describes your situation. I've put SDOT's contact information below, as well as the direct link to the street tree permitting page that it's actually great. They have screenshots that show you step by step how to submit a permit for all of the things we've described. And then the link to the portal that you're going to do that in. So trees for neighborhoods. Back to our program. So you can apply to up to 3 trees a year as part of the program, and you have a lifetime maximum of 6 per household. So that means you can apply for 3 trees every year, but when you hit 6, um, that is your lifetime maximum, and that is trees that you've been awarded in the program. If you are a property owner, and let's say you own 4 different homes and properties in the city of Seattle, each of those homes will have a lifetime maximum of 6. So each property is its own entity, so to speak, as part of our program. We help you with tree selection. Feel free to reach out, email me some photos, give me your address, and I can look up your planting strip, things like this. The street tree permitting process that we've just talked about. For every tree that you're awarded in the lottery, you'll receive a watering bag and mulch. So if you get 3 trees, you get 3 watering bags and 3 bags of mulch. You'll get planting and care instruction, summer watering reminders that I'm going to send out roughly every 2 weeks, years. And after your first year, so if you participate this year, next year, you're going to get an email that will invite you to a young tree pruning workshop where we're going to teach you how to evaluate your tree and start pruning for it while it's young. Those are led by some really incredible local arborists that Olivia helps us set up. So you'll be set up for that as well. Your responsibility in all of this is to please choose trees that are appropriate for the space. Indicate whether or not that tree is going to be planted on the street. And this is very important. Please only plant trees in approved locations. So if you apply for an alley elm in your planting strip and a honey locust for your yard, when SDOT comes out and gives you the permit, they're visualizing the alley elm for that space. They're going to grow to spread different. You know, the alley elm is going to be 30 feet. The honey locust is going to be 20. But they are approving for you to plant that alley elm in the parking strip. It's also very important because when Olivia and her team in the summer go out and do a health evaluation for trees we planted the last 2 years, they're going to be looking for the tree that you said was going to be a yard tree. So if there's a honey locust there and they're looking for the alley elm, they're going to be like, hey, like what happened? You know, I'll probably be reaching out just to see. But it's really important. And this also goes for where they mark where your tree is going to be planted. They've put that stake there for a reason. Maybe there's utilities, maybe there's a conflict, being too close to a sign. You know, there might be a little bit of wiggle room, but if you receive a stake that says, please plant in this space and you plant 10 feet over, that's not quite the space you've been approved for. And there might be reasons why that stake was put there, and you can reach out. We'll talk about it if you want to adjust it, but just know that that is intentional, exactly where they've given you permissions to plant. And it's to set the tree up for the most success, considering all of the things we've talked about today. Please plant your tree in the ground. Trees are going to reach their maximum full potential. They're going to be able to grow larger, and they're going to be able to contribute the most benefits by being planted in the ground. And I only say this because there have been trees from the program that folks want to put in containers and have, you know, in their front or backyard in a pot. These trees want space to grow. They're not container trees, especially our large conifers. So please plant them in the ground. And then again, your responsibility is going to end up being all future maintenance, you know, which is watering, raking, pruning, etc., for the lifetime of that tree. Very quickly, just to run through our timeline, trying to be mindful of our time here. The applications have opened. They're going to close on July 29th at the end of the day. So you've got about 2 weeks, roughly. You are attending our second and last webinar now. Thank you for being here. And we have 4 planting and care workshops in 4 different locations in the city. If you sign up for one of these and something comes up and you no longer can attend that workshop, you need to be able to attend one of these other 3. You have to attend a workshop to get your tree. We check these. It's really important. We want to make sure you're really fully equipped and ready to plant your tree and offer all of that support. And if you find that you're going to be out of town or something's going on and you can't make any of these, please reach out to me ASAP so that we can work something out and we can have a discussion on maybe what we're able to do. And just really quickly, just a few application tips. So this is the direct link to the application. If you watch this webinar or you and your friends are talking and you want to make edits to your application, you can go back into Civiform and make those edits to your application. Unfortunately, I do not have the powers to do so on my end, so it's really important if you want to make those adjustments that you go in and let me know if you have any issues. This is our first year on Civiform, so do let me know if it's difficult or whatever may be going on so we can troubleshoot that. Please submit one application per household. And if you have multiple homes on the same property or like condos or something like this, please work with your neighbors and coordinate one application for the shared space you have. If you have room, please plant the largest tree that you have for the space you have available. And be mindful of others and the space that they might be limited to. Only apply for the number of trees you have room for. This is not an order of preference. If you say you're going to plant 3 trees in the application, there's a chance you're going to get all 3 trees. So this is not, my first choice is a Sarah's favorite crepe, but if I can't get that, I'll take this or this. You can get all 3. You're saying I'm committing to planting those trees. So please be mindful and please make edits if needed to your application. Let us know. And if you're waitlisted for a tree in August, hang tight if it's a yard tree. Things happen, permits get denied. You might end up getting that tree by the end of the season. Because of this, if you're waitlisted after applications have closed for a street tree, unfortunately, we have such a tight window between this program, Olivia's team, and SDOT to get all of those street tree permits evaluated, checked, approved, and sorted before workshops start happening. And if you're waitlisted for a street tree, I won't be able to offer that tree for you. But if you're a yard tree, hang tight, let me know, and you never know what might end up happening and where you end up landing in line in the lottery. I'll say this very quickly, getting close to our time here, but I just want to say we've moved some stuff around in the application. So the first, your address, and this is going to be an eligibility question. Civiform uses some sophisticated mapping software, and it understands what the city limits are for the city of Seattle. And this is very important because there are zip codes that fall partially in the city limits and partially out, such as 98178, 98146, 98126, 98106, and 98108. And we put this first because we would just feel terrible if folks got really excited and they went through the whole application just to find out at the end that their home does not fall within Seattle city limits. That is part of what our program offers and what we're able to offer is within the city limits. So if you are eligible, you're going to be immediately prompted to the next question, and you're going to see this green box come up. The wording is vague for both of these that says like you may qualify or you may not qualify. It's a very polite way of saying you do or you do not. We're hoping to make this language clearer moving forward, but green box is good. Keep going, submit your application. If this window pops up on the right side of the image, this means that your address does not fall within Seattle city limits, and it's going to ask you to go back and change it or prompt you to apply to a different program. If you're not sure and you hit review and you can see the list of all your questions, you're going to see, oops, here we go. You're going to see that this will tell you does not qualify. You're welcome to call me. We can chat, double check, but we do want to save folks time and we appreciate your willingness and excitement for the program, but we would like to be able to tell you right away in the application whether or not you're eligible. I'll say this quickly. When you're filling out your information, please be mindful of email address. We get a lot of Gmails and not Gmail. This is really important for you to receive accurate and timely updates about the program and your status in it. But also When we get a lot of incorrect emails, this can crash our system when we try to import everything into the database and send out those mass emails. So please, for both you and I, double check that your email address is accurate. You're going to get a list of tree species in the application, and each of these will link to the website. So in the app, you can be like, ooh, the American smoke tree, and you can click in and read about it before you submit. Mind you, you can edit your application. You know, we have 14 trees that we're offering this year, and we have 3 categories that we typically offer trees for. And that's going to be under power lines, street trees, or your yard, or yard trees. And in limited situations, if you have an appropriate planting strip, which for this year needs to be 12 feet or larger, you can accommodate what we would consider our yard trees. Our yard trees are our conifers. And like I said, 12 feet or larger for the planting strip and no overhead wires. We have the ponderosa pine, which is a native to Eastern Washington. Doesn't quite get the same size here in the Puget Sound, but it does keep all of its beauty. The Douglas fir is another classic here in the Pacific Northwest, and known for its upright growth and lush needles, and very nice downward sweeping canopy. We have the green giant arborvitae, and this is a cross between our native western red cedar and a Japanese arborvitae. This is really dense, pyramid shaped. Just tongue twisters. And great for screening, also is tolerant of damp soils. The incense cedar, which has glossy, bright green foliage, also native to Northern California and Oregon, very adaptable to wet and dry, and is also great for screening. We have our yard trees, which is the Tupelo Tower Black Tupelo, which has a nice central leader in an oval form, a really tough, resilient urban tree. The hackberry, also a really tough tree and has that really interesting warty bark. It has a very small fruit that is very attractive to wildlife and birds. The alley elm is vase shaped, very glossy, has really beautiful tan and orange bark. The honey locust is thornless, and it's a bit more of a columnar species. It only doesn't spread as much as some of our other trees do. And the chinkapin oak, which is a wonderful low maintenance shade tree. Mind you, all of these street trees need an 8-foot minimum planting strip, except the Tupelo Tower that can have a 6-foot planting strip. Under power lines, we have the copper curls, beautiful street tree or yard tree, very nice show of flowers in May to June. The Satomi dogwood is a Chinese dogwood with beautiful pink flowers, really a pollinator magnet in late spring. Sarah's favorite crepe myrtle, great for sunny spaces. Flowers kind of mid to late summer. It has nice like peeling cinnamon colored bark. The American smoke tree is a smaller tree, but gets really nice foliage in the fall, bright colors, and has that smoky flower appearance. And the evening light Japanese snowbell, which is a cultivar of the Japanese snowbell, an oval growth habit. Thanks for bearing with me. And they have these really nice maroon green leaves that provide just a really cool color contrast. All right, I'm very quickly going to go over at least one example. We'll leave about 10 minutes for questions. I'll leave a second example in here too, and if we have time, maybe I'll hit the next one because I think it's a really good one too. But so let's do some practice. So let's say you're looking at this planting strip and you're home and you're like, all right, first step, where do I have available planting space? As you can see, the yard is pretty dense. The yard is pretty dense and not so much space for a tree. So we're like, all right, looks like the planting strip is going to be a great place to consider a tree this year. You can see you have your service drop, which again is not high voltage, and this is going from the power lines to your home. These are your communication lines, those thick black wires about 20 feet high, not high voltage. However, I know it's there, and it's a little sneaky in this photo. You can kind of see it up here, but If you have these directly over your planting strip, there are high voltage lines here. So even though we're looking at this planting strip and thinking, this is pretty large, maybe I can fit an oak tree in this planting strip, because you have these overhead power lines up here, you are restricted to a power line friendly tree. And we can kind of see our water box here. So we're going to want to be 5 feet away from that. I would probably avoid planting directly under your service drop just so you don't have to move it later. So it's probably going to land us about here, roughly. But we're going to want to consider first our space, the surrounding structures and utilities, the size of our planting strip, and just kind of work your way through the list, and you're going to start to narrow down your trees pretty quickly, and then hopefully have a few options. And this gets a lot of sun here. It looks like a pretty exposed site, so maybe a Sarah's favorite crepe myrtle would be a great choice for this particular spot. And then in an effort to have a few questions, I've got more examples if we have the time. My contact information is here, and I'll leave this here to read as we go through some questions. But thanks, everyone.
Yeah, we only have one question so far, but feel free to keep sending them in, folks. Is it okay to plant a tree over the site where a previous tree was cut down? The stump is now covered with mulch. Will they need to do any like stump grinding or anything like that?
Yeah, I would say I would consider why the tree was removed, particularly if it was removed for having a disease such as the verticillium wilt. You do not want to replant a tree that is also susceptible to the same soil-borne fungus. So think about, why that tree was removed. Maybe it just met the end of its lifetime, but I would grind up that stump and give it more space to grow, and do a little bit of prep work before you receive your tree.
Great. And thinking about tree spacing in my yard, should I also be thinking about my patios or any other hardscaping? I just don't want to buckle the concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. I would treat those as if it were like a driveway, so to speak, and give yourself at least, 7.5 feet is a great distance to move that tree over so that it doesn't run a risk of pulling up your hardscapes as well. So give yourself a little bit of space away from those.
Mhm. When you measure from a utility pole or another tree, is it from the center of the pole or trunk or the nearest edge of it?
Yeah, I would say if you're spacing for your trees, I would start, standing next to the existing tree and then move forward from there. Um, and then same with the pole, and give yourself extra space. I wouldn't start your spacing at the edge of the canopy. Just start kind of right where the base is located of that
Mhm.
utility or tree.
But I would say, yeah, if it's like a pretty decently narrow trunk,
Yeah.
half a foot won't make too much of a difference, but we're talking a giant sequoia or something. You might want to measure from the edge of the trunk.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, thanks, Olivia, for putting that one in context. Yes, if you have a big tree, that's definitely the right choice.
Um, there was a three-letter abbreviation in green after several of the
Hmm.
trees. What do those mean?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I completely forgot that part. Thanks for reminding me. Um, so what that is referring to, it's GPP, and that means it's a great plant pick. And essentially, there is a committee of folks out there who are from our region, BC, Oregon, Washington, the Pacific Northwest. And it's a committee dedicated to really diving deep and considering what trees do really well here in our climate and our region of the world. So not to say that any of those other trees don't do well, but anything that is a GPP has gone through more of a peer reviewed process, so to speak, that a lot of folks are backing up as an appropriate tree for our area.
Well, that's all we have for questions for right now. Do you want to go through another example?
Yeah, let's do one more. And I will say too, on this other resources slide, I have put the direct link to the 811 website This is where you'll be submitting a ticket to get your utilities checked. And they also have a really great video that is a step-by-step guide on how to submit a ticket for 811. So you can just click right on that link and it'll bring you right to it. Oof, if I can get rid of the laser. Sorry, folks. All right, so let's do one more example, and I really like this one. So let's say, this is our home, and again, we're thinking about where do we want to plant a tree and what space do we have available. As you can see too, the yard is pretty dense, not so much room to plant a tree, but we have these 2 planting strips that provide some really good opportunity for a tree. Let's say we're starting on the left side. This is a pretty good size planting strip. So, maybe we can look at those street or yard trees if it's at least 6 to 8 feet. So we're like, okay, we've got some options. There are no overhead lines here. This is going to be your service drop, and that's how you're getting power directly to your home. So there's no overhead wires. We've got a good planting strip that you'll measure out. There is a driveway here. So we know we're going to have to be about 7.5 feet away from the driveway. We don't want to plant directly in front of this sign because we don't want to block signage for you or others in the community. And it's something unique about this property that we haven't discussed yet is you need to be at least 30 feet away from the intersection. They've actually kind of done a great job already giving you that imaginary line right here. But you're going to take the center of your intersection and you're going to want to go 30 feet in. And that's the first place that you can consider planting a tree. And this is for intersections. All of that information is listed for you online. So maybe you're thinking you can fit potentially 1 to 2 trees here with that intersection and the driveway in mind. Now, if you're looking at this planting strip, it's the same size as the other one. So maybe right away you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can match my trees. But do know, so these are your communication lines, but you can see the cross arm right here. So this planting strip, even though it's the same size as the other one and could accommodate a bigger tree, you are automatically restricted to planting a power line suitable tree. So we know right away we're going to be picking one of those 5 trees on our list this year for power lines. And then again, we're going to go kind of measure out to the middle of your corner here. You're going to go 30 feet in, and you'll have space in your planting strip 30 feet in. And again, a really pretty nice sunny spot. So maybe you want to consider planting the Sarah's favorite crepe myrtle here, or an American smoke tree. But a really great example of a same planting strip in the same situation that have different parameters and different things that you should really consider when planting that will ultimately affect the decision and the tree species that you're able to plant in your space. Yeah, that puts us just about right on time. So did any more questions come through?
Yeah, no more questions. But again, on Monday, I'll send out a link to the recording of this email, to an email with a link to the recording of this presentation. And that will also include a PDF, a Bria's presentation, and a link to the application. Because reminder, it closes on July 29th. So we got about, what is that? 2.5 weeks
Yeah.
to go. But again, feel free to send that email on to family, friends, neighbors. Trees are a neighborhood benefit. So getting as many planted as possible is our goal. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us this morning, everyone, and good luck with your applications.
Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Bye.